out in the Namib Desert. I had just hitchhiked back from Luderitz, a small old German community on the coast. I got up to the intersection where the big north-south highway that runs from Walfish Bay down to Cape Town passes. My driver was going north. I'd just come from the north. I was going south. Nobody else picked me up. I went out over the bank of the hill. It was all the sorts of things that you have. What the governor was talking about, visions. If you don't use any chemicals, the place where you have visions is by not eating very much, being really, really hot, traveling by yourself for a few years alone, and find yourself out in the middle of a desert where you know that virtually everything out there is cold-blooded and the warmest thing around is you. On a very clear night with a full moon and stars with the brightness that you can only get in the middle of an African desert, and suddenly that ecology book came back into my mind. I have no explanation for why this occurred, but that night I thought that I was coming up with something that was profound and important and new and that I wanted to act on. And it was the recognition that there were certain principles of ecology that applied to all of nature, to every biological system. They were anticipatable, they worked. You could predict how things would function by simply looking at the conditions and the principles that were applying to them. Ecology is largely dominated by a search for the most efficient possible use of scarce energy that is captured in a dilute form through photosynthesis and then through various kinds of living organisms, plant and animal. Through a process called oxidative phosphorylation, it releases the energy that powers all life on the planet. That part of it, us too. But we, in addition to the sunlight, had managed to turn to fossil fuels. But there were a huge number of other problems that had to do with this disconnect between how we were measuring our progress, this growth of gross domestic product, and the way that any rational person would view happiness and success and a non-monetary prosperity. That disconnect, I think, had a huge amount to do with our avoidance of those principles. I got up the following morning thinking that there was no vocabulary for urban ecology or industrial ecology in those days, but I came back with the arrogance of a 20-year-old. I was going to come back and write Das Kapital, or I was going to write Wealth of Nations, or I was going to write this great tome that explained how you would redesign human society around ecological principles. I've tried that twice. I've failed on both occasions, but I'm still relatively young. But that night was the pivotal moment in my life. There's me before that night, and there's me after that night. And after that night, I've had a governing set of values that sort of illustrate everything, from getting involved in that first Earth Day, from going to work at SERI, from setting up various organizations to try to bring the power of consumers to affect environmentally sound choices, to bring the power of investors to affect the policies and the boards of directors of corporations, moving to the Bullitt Foundation, the kind of legal practice that I had before I went there, the books, articles, campaigns that I've been involved with, they were all driven by that coming together in one night of a motive force. Here you can actually find a governor and talk to him and convince him of something. I have for the last 20 years spent easily 4/5 of my work hours working on Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia, trying to build models of sustainability, and it's really tractable. There's nobody that you can't get to. There are occasionally people that you can't convince, but on both sides of the aisle, both sides of the Cascade Divide, what you are setting out to do in Colorado and what I hope is going to be emulated in state after state after state across the country is where the real action will be in the United States.